Hey guys, I am just doing a live stream here because there was a technical problem with the premiere that was supposed to start over an hour ago now. So figured I would just do this so I could both explain what the problem was and people wouldn't have to have a entirely give them an argument free evening. Uh, so, hi, Anthony. Um, yeah, so I just got off the phone with the video editor. I'd actually left right around when it was supposed to be starting, and I had no reason to think anything had gone wrong. I left to take the dog on a walk and went for a pretty long walk and listened to some of an audiobook, and I came back and, I was going to make dinner, put on a couple of burgers for me and Jennifer. And then I was going to watch the chats on the premiere while I cooked the burgers. And then I saw that it wasn't happening, and I was getting messages. Hey, there's no stream. Hey, Jave, hope I'm pronouncing that right. So I called up the video editor, and he had no idea. Yes, thank you, Jennifer and me. That was some bad grammar right there. Forgive me. So anyway, so I called called my video editor, Forrest, who absolutely not his fault. Very talented guy. Hire him if you have video editing work to do. He also does it for TMBS and Jacobin. But he had no idea what was going on. He had no reason to think that anything was going on until I called him. And oh wow, somebody says Rudy. I assume that means Rudy Giuliani is coughing on Fox right now. Saw there was a great Onion article about Rudy Giuliani being diagnosed with several dozen rare bat diseases having absolutely nothing to do with COVID. Thank you, Campbell. I really appreciate that. There's a book, Christopher Hitchens, a very young Christopher Hitchens wrote a introduction to a 1971 edition of a collection of Marx's writings on the Paris Commune I've been trying to get a hold of. So really appreciate that. But in any case, so anyway, I called Forrest. Yeah, Gervais says my boss today said I can handle 10 COVIDs, but the election worries me so much. A millionaire can handle 10 COVIDs. Yeah, right. I mean, I think, I think, both are extremely worrying, and the intersection of the two is extremely worrying. We should have universal nationwide mail-in ballots right now, which, we wouldn't anyway, but among other problems, we have this ridiculous anachronistic federalist system where the states run elections. There's absolutely no reason for that to happen. And yes, I agree. It's a silly thing to say. Although it did kind of remind me of what Pete Dominick told me he said in a stand-up act about how so many people want to vote Trump out that they would swim through an ocean of COVID to vote on a voting machine made out of COVID for a candidate, M COVID, which, anyway, whatever, made me laugh. But yes, I also think there's a millionaire being dismissive of what the COVID crisis means, for everybody else is also pretty revealing. I agree with that. But in any case, like I was saying, I called the video editor. He had no idea what was going on. We both looked at it to see if he'd forgotten to check something or click something, and it really didn't look like it. It looks like somehow on YouTube's end there was just some sort of problem with with processing the video, or, for some reason it said it was all uploaded and processed, but it wasn't. He said it's a really big file. I mean, it's only, the episode's just the regular length, but I guess because of some of the video effects or whatever, it was a big file, but that shouldn't make a difference. He said he's uploaded files bigger than that before with no problem. So I have no idea what happened there, but in the end, we just couldn't figure it out. So he deleted the video and re-uploaded it, and we would just do the premiere now, but the uploading can take 2 hours. So we're just going to set the premiere for tomorrow night. So like I said, it's the whole thing is incredibly frustrating, but there you go. I really hate to have to delay a premiere, since really want people to know that for sure Monday 7:30 this always happens. You can count on it. You can plan your evening around it if you want to. If you're going to watch it, but yes, as Anthony says in the chat, it is what it is. I just, anyway, like I said, very, very, very frustrated. Nobody's fault except maybe YouTube's, but very frustrating. Let's see. Meanwhile, hit me up with, look, I'm here for you. I didn't want you to go completely. Thank you. Daniel says that he's reading my book. Logic is hard. I should say, what was I going to say? Yeah. Speaking actually of logic and of the first book, check out the video that I did for Zero Books this week. It just went up earlier tonight. It's called something like the left. I mean, Doug came up with the name, but it's something like the left should be logic nerds. But basically, what it's an attempt at doing is sort of explaining what I'm even talking about, what I say. Like, it's worthwhile. It's actually politically important in ways that might be surprising. If you're committed to a left project, to learn a little bit of logic, what that even means, why it matters, try to kind of explain that and make a pitch for it in a little bit of a different way. So check that out. RM says, will you ever have George Galloway on? Yeah, sure. I don't agree with him about everything, but I remember reading his memoir years and years ago and liking it. And he certainly did, as a Michigan native, he certainly gets respect for me for the way he handled his confrontation with our longstanding neoliberal Democratic Senator Carl Levin during Senate hearings, for which he was brought to Washington, D.C. He was invited to come speak to the Senate, and they were grilling him about Iraq and his visits to Iraq before the war. I remember he, hi Andy. He had a nice line in there. I think it was there about how the difference between him and the difference between him and Dick Cheney is that when he visited Saddam Hussein, he did it to urge Hussein to disarm, and when Dick Cheney visited Saddam Hussein, he did it to sell him weapons. I also liked that during that Senate hearing, Galloway. I always loved this. He said that he went outside in the middle of during a break in the Senate hearing to stand outside the Capitol and do a little embargo busting on the spot by smoking a Cuban cigar right outside of the Capitol. So there's something pretty awesome about that. Hello from the Midden. If you mean Michigan, that's where I am also. Jennifer and I have been here since last Thursday, I guess. See, Elijah Colbert says, hey, Ben, I'm 19 and interested in democratic socialism. Can you give me book recommendations to learn more about it and its policies? I think it depends what you're looking for, right? Like if you mean, thank you. Gervais says, and good luck with your semester. Fortunately, my wife and I are both teaching online this year, which is why we're back in Michigan now. that there really didn't seem like any reason we had to be in Atlanta right now, so save a little money. Oh yeah, I was going to say, so there was the question, there was the request for book recommendations about democratic socialism. I think it depends what you mean. So there was, if you mean like in the book that I'm writing with Bhaskar and with Mike Beggs about like what feasible socialism might look like, we call that idea of like a completely post-capitalist society, full democratic socialism. And what you mean is full democratic socialism, then unless you want to wait for the book that me and Bhaskar and Mike are writing, it's Mike Beggs, who's an economist in Australia, is the third co-author on that. So if you don't want to wait for that, you can, a book that I would really recommend would be David Schweikart, After Capitalism. It's the second edition. I think it came out in 2002, maybe at the end of 2001, but one of those for sure. There's like an introduction where it talks a little bit about 9/11 and the war on terror, and you can tell that it was like a last minute addition to the book. And anyway, I think he has like a really well thought out idea there about how a completely post-capitalist society would work with workers' control of production and all of that stuff. And it's very good. Schweikart has PhDs in both economics and philosophy, and he puts both to really good use in that book. I would really recommend it. On that subject, Brent Irvin says, any chance of doing a critique of Paracon? So Paracon means participatory economics, which is the stuff that's Michael Albert and Robin Hanhel. Never been sure how to say that. I think Hanhel. So yeah, I would totally have Michael Albert, Robin Hanhel on as guests. I've watched videos of both of those people where they've had a lot of interesting things to say, both about Paracon and about other subjects. I'm actually not entirely unsympathetic to Paracon. I think it's an interesting idea. My objection is basically the one that, Oscar Wilde supposedly said. I think Matt Leck, who would know, right, because he does the Literary Hangover podcast, tells me that he didn't really say it. But anyway, whoever said it, right, that the problem with socialism is it's too many damn meetings. And Albert and Hanhel's Paracon, right, participatory economics, that model of how workers' control production could work, does very much strike me as an awful lot of meetings, because the way they set it up, rather than having any residual market mechanisms, or even like what are sometimes called shadow markets, which would be the idea that maybe if technology gets good enough, we can have algorithms that basically just replicate what would happen in markets, that we would have workers' councils that would handle production and consumer councils that would handle consumption requests. And there'd be this incredibly complicated process they describe where everybody puts in their consumption requests, and then you put together these plans, yearly plans, I guess, they're yearly consumption requests, and you go back and forth a bunch of times to line up the two until they're in equilibrium. And it sounds, again, I respect both of those guys. I would totally have them as guests. I think they have interesting things to say both about this and about other subjects, but it's always sounded pretty cumbersome to me. It's always sounded like we'd spend an awful lot of our time in workers' council and consumer federation meetings figuring this stuff out. And so maybe in some future society where AI got good enough that you could just outsource a lot of this to them, that would start sounding a lot more plausible to me. But I'm somewhat skeptical about it right now. Capitalists do have meetings, right? The question is not, of course, somebody's going to be having meetings. Absolutely. And sure. Oscar Wilde, I'm sure, said lots of things that I wouldn't agree with. Of course, somebody's going to be having meetings, right? The question is not so much whether there's going to be somebody having meetings or not, but how the rest of us have to interact with that, right? So to my mind, one of the great virtues of socialism, of workers' control the means of production, is that we could all have lots more free time. That, if workers are in control of the factories and the stores and all that stuff, then if there's some new automation that comes in, right? Like there's some piece of labor saving technology that comes along that means that it takes like half as many hours to make whatever the company was making. Well, a traditional capitalist firm, with an external owner, the owner's incentive is going to be to lay off half of the workforce and have the other half work just as hard as ever, right? Like that's going to be, or if he keeps everybody, to just cut everybody's hours and hence income in half. But under, if workers are in control means production, then in that situation, the incentive would be to keep everybody's job and just cut everybody's hours in half for exactly the same compensation. Or, if we're imagining some really advanced socialist society with no money, the exact same consumption requests, whatever, right? So the good thing about this idea, right? Like I've always thought one of the best things about that is that it would free up so much human potential if, like, the way that automation played out under socialism was that people were maybe only working 20 hours a week instead of 40 hours a week. People would have so much more time to pursue everything that matters to them in life, right? So, if you've always wanted to write a novel, you'd be writing a novel. If you always wanted to start a grunge band, you'd be starting a grunge band, whatever that looks like, right? So if you had a society where it was either a market socialist society, where you had elected management within firms, or however it worked, right? Then sure, those elected managers would be spending a lot of time in meetings. Fair enough, that would be their job, but you wouldn't have the extra thing that you have under Paracon, right? Like the worry about Paracon isn't so much that somebody's managing production and having meetings about it, like what you have under either capitalism or market socialism. The worry rather is a little bit different, right? You have the worry is that under either capitalism or market socialism, the actual coordination of production with consumer preferences just happens as a result of the normal operation of markets. That you don't like that. The coordination of supply and demand happens that way, so you don't get empty shelves or shelves bursting with stuff that no one wants. Whereas under Paracon, that coordination would have to be basically like that change from markets to Paracon, at least given current technology. Maybe with future technology, a lot of this stuff could be offloaded from worker and consumer councils to AI, and we could all spend our lives doing what we wanted, and that would be even better, right? Because you'd lose all the evils that come from having markets. But what I was going to say about that, right, is that you would get is that if instead of the coordination being done by markets, it was being done manually, essentially, by workers councils and consumption councils, then the effect of that would, it seems a little bit like saying that that we're going to really, really, really slow things down because everything has to be a decision, right? So it's not just a few managers whose job, right, is to be in meetings. It's that everybody has to spend a lot of time voting about every little thing, right? That's more the concern, and also that you'd have to make your consumption requests like by the year, right? I mean, I can't even go to the grocery store without realizing, the next day that I forgot to get 3 things that I should have ordered, etc. So that would really be the concern about Paracon. If you want to read more about this, there's a book called Alternatives to Capitalism that's co-written by Robin Hanhel and Eric Olin Wright. Eric Olin Wright is more of a market socialist. Hanhel, of course, advocates participatory economics, and they have a lot of and in the different chapters of it, basically they're dueling essays going back and forth arguing about this stuff. So wherever you end up coming down on it, if you want to know more about it, I would really recommend that. McMindfulness, Who Moved My Cheese, mentioned the idea of balanced job complexes, which I agree. That's the best part of Paracon. Like that's the best idea that Albert and Hanhel had. And it's something you could totally do in like a worker cooperative business right now, right? Which is to say, instead of some people spending all day sweeping floors and some people spending all day every day, going to meetings, that the sort of dirtiest, most gruntiest work would have to be spread around everybody who worked there. So everybody would get a turn both doing that and doing the more desirable, more empowering tasks. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, exactly. No one is above taking out the garbage. Yes, there is a book behind me that's both about and by Ozzy Osbourne, or whatever. It's supposedly by him. I tend to assume that the co-author, ghostwriter, that it, like, I don't know. I've always kind of joked that he probably the ghostwriter, like, this is essentially a novel that's loosely based on whatever Ozzy muttered at him. But that might be unfair. Maybe Ozzy is still more lucid than that. But yeah, it's actually a really good book. Like I am pretty fond of those kind of rock memoirs. Like I've read several of those things. And this might be one of the best ones, right? So, yes, Ozzy did bite the head off of a bat one time. I don't know if it was alive or dead when he bit off its head. He says in the memoir "I Am Ozzy" that he didn't know that it was a real bat. Apparently, like somebody, like some fan, he claims, right, threw it on stage, and he just grabbed it and bit its head off. And didn't realize until he did it that was a real bat and not a toy bat. Take that or leave that as far as whether you believe that. Ozzy is patient 0 for the coronavirus. And I guess they rushed him to the hospital right away when he realized what he'd done, which you would think would happen before you bit all the way through the bat's head, but who knows? Andy says Ozzy snorted a line of ants once. I don't think I remembered that. Of course, yeah, this is what in another book you can see behind me, a couple away from Ozzy's memoir, there is Keith Richards' memoir, which is where he says, which is where I got that detail that was the title of a recent episode, which I know is a little shameless to title whole episode based on a throwaway line, but it just amuses me so much that Keith Richards apparently actually snorted some of his dad's ashes. Like he mixed some of his dad's ashes with some cocaine and snorted it, which is possibly the most Keith Richards story ever. But anyway, I've read several of these things, and the Ozzy one is really good. I remember Elizabeth Hand, who's a novelist that I like. She wrote a book called Wilding Hall, which is kind of a fictional version of a rock memoir. So obviously she read a lot of these things when she was researching it, and I think she said that she thought that was one of the best ones. Yeah, somebody in the chat says I'm too they're not me, obviously. I'm 40, but this person says they're too Zoomer for Ozzy drama, and a couple of people point out that there's some very intense anti-war stuff in Ozzy era Black Sabbath, right, in the 70s, which I love Ozzy era Black Sabbath just as music. I also like Ozzy's solo career, but I mean, to me, it goes Ozzy era Black Sabbath, then solo Ozzy, maybe then solo Dio, and then Dio era Black Sabbath. But yeah, War Pigs is a absolutely fantastic anti-war song. Big fan of that book. I don't know if I would say Electric Funeral is even better than War Pigs, but Electric Funeral is very good. I'm a fan. Andy, the guy who does all the logos, if you have graphic design work that needs to be done, you should hire him, asks, did I see Cher and David Bowie perform Young Americans as a medley on her TV show? I don't know. I haven't seen that. I was actually just saying to him, I think, the other night that, I mean, I like Bowie, but like my preferred speed of Bowie is definitely the Ziggy Stardust era stuff. In fact, that album is, I mean, that's really like would probably go in like a top 20 list or something of overall favorite albums. Let's see. Somebody. Oh, by the way, I should say, I haven't read his memoir, but on the subject of politics and Black Sabbath, I've had this idea for an essay that's been floating around in my head for years. I'll probably never write it, but be called Black Sabbath and the Music of Proletarian Rage, which we're going to talk about War Pigs and also talk about something a lot of people in my experience don't know, even if they do listen to music, which is the origin story of Tony Iommi, who's the guitarist for Black Sabbath, about his how he's often credited with really innovating the like sort of later metal guitar playing style, which was not intentional originally. It happened. Yeah, somebody in chat mentioned what I was about to say. The reason it happened, right? This wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna like be innovative and come up with this new guitar style. It happened because when they got the contract, from the the company, they were going to make a lot of money, go touring, all that stuff. He was working in a factory, and he actually came home at lunch. He'd gotten the news. He told his mom, who he still lived with at the time, that he was going to, that he didn't even think he was going to go back to work, because why should he? He realized he was going to quit right then, right in the middle of the day. And his mom said, no, Tony, do it right. Go back to work. Finish out the day. Quit right. And then he ends of a couple of his fingers got chopped off in an industrial accident that afternoon. And so he had to teach himself to play guitar in a completely different way. But so, yeah, this is one of those things, that like in this case, tips of his fingers, right? Did I say something else? Okay. Anyway. So it's just one of those things that, in that case, bad safety at a factory, not to mention the backdrop of the Vietnam War that hadn't ended that long ago, inspiring the lyrics of songs like War Pigs, gave us that music, sort of like on Brian Leiter, who's a philosophy blogger. I remember having a great line years ago about how the two people in the world who had done the most for the academic quality of American philosophy departments were Adolf Hitler and Margaret Thatcher, because so many good philosophers fled from Germany when Hitler came to power, and some of them ended up in the U.S., and so many good philosophers left the UK to get jobs in the US because of Margaret Thatcher's budget cuts in the 1980s. So, yeah, somebody, Anthony in chat says Django Reinhardt got his sound from the fire he survived as a child. Do not know that story. Let's see. Somebody asked what. Oh, actually, I'll do this one first because I have unfortunately less to say about it. Dikshant Kunwar, I hope I am pronouncing that right. My apologies if I'm not, says, hey, Ben, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on current Indian politics and should there be an internationalist left to form solidarity with the Indian left? Yeah, I mean, obviously, Modi coming to power as the head of a literal fascist party, right? That's not like the usual lefty hyperbole about conservatives, like literally his party, the BJP, like when it was founded, it cited the Italian Fascist Party as an explicit inspiration. And of course, Modi, famously before becoming prime minister, oversaw a pogrom against Muslims, or at the very least, at best, right? Definitely didn't do anything to stop it. So obviously, that's incredibly disturbing. Obviously, international solidarity is incredibly important. But off the top of my head, right? I don't have that much more to say about that. Somebody, let's see. This was the story about Django Reinhardt. Anthony says his mom made flowers from nitrocellulose. One night, a candle started a fire, which burned everything on his dominant hand except 2 fingers. Wow, had not heard that before. So there was some. Probably get used to this. There's some jokes about canceling, oh, by the way, I actually got to see Black Sabbath, with Ozzy. It was the reunion tour in Pompano Beach, I want to say. It was when I was living in Miami. This would have been like 2013, which was very awesome. I'm really happy I got to see that. Like, I remember as me and my friend Noel were coming there, and as we were parking, leaving the car, you could hear those like siren sounds from the beginning of War Pigs. Anthony says sorry, it was his wife. So anyway, there were some jokes in the chat about canceling and canceling fascists. Is it bad to cancel someone if they're bad? Of course, it depends what you mean. One of the reasons I'm actually not crazy about the phrase cancel culture, I'll use it because with almost any topic, I would almost always rather prefer to argue about the thing itself rather than argue about terminology, right? If you're going to argue about the thing that's generally called this, I'm sure there's a line, but short of that line, right? I'd rather not get sucked into semantic arguments. But I think the older term call out culture was better, was more descriptive. Or you could just call it like, somebody mentions ContraPoint's video on canceling, which I think is very good. I'd really recommend that as like a crash course in the phenomenon. I think ContraPoint's video about canceling and John Ronson's book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, I think put together, those are probably the best resources for getting a handle on what people are talking about. Oh yeah, Children of the Grave is a great song. Django Reinhardt's story. In the night of November 2, 1928, Reinhardt was going to bed in the wagon that he and his wife shared in the caravan. He knocked over a candle, which ignited the extremely flammable celluloid. But yeah. About canceling, right? So I think that, like I said, the older term call-out culture was probably better and more accurate. I've often suggested that it would be better to call it like public shaming culture or denunciation culture or something like that, right? I think what we're really talking about, we're talking about cancel culture. Again, it's a very inexact word, but let's also remember that the word canceling is applied to this stuff wasn't made up by critics of cancel culture. It was made up by people doing the canceling, right? And what they approximately meant by canceling was doing this kind of online pile-ons, right? Denouncing people and calling for everybody to shun them, for them to be fired, stuff like that. All right, I guess we're about done with this guy. Let's hide user on this channel. Master of Reality is a great album. I know this is not a very hot take, but I think Paranoid is probably my favorite Black Sabbath album. But yeah, Master of Reality is good. There's trying to. Oh, actually, sorry. What am I thinking? Black Sabbath Volume 4. That one is amazing. So yeah, I think that Yeah, somebody says in the chat, I've always thought you can change someone's mind slowly over time, not forcefully at once. I think there's a lot of truth to that, right? And this is kind of what I talk about in the first book, Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. But yeah, like when you're talking about cancel culture, what people are really talking about there is a cluster of cultural and technological trends that lead to this situation where it almost feels like mutual surveillance, right? Like we're, like a lot, like everybody's kind of, monitoring each other to come up with reasons to jump on them, right? That they have and I disagree that canceling necessarily implies commercial or career sanction. I understand that it might seem like it implies that, which is one of the reasons I think it's a very inexact phrase for what it's supposed to describe. But I think what we're really talking about is a culture of mutual surveillance and just hair-trigger denunciation. They're saying, like, again, I know anybody who's seen me talk about this or read my Jacobin article, so you're still being publicly shamed, has probably heard me mention the example of Wendell Potter, who is this former health insurance executive who kind of had a road to Damascus moment and became a crusader for single payer. And I remember a couple of months ago, he tweeted out this thing that, like, the kind of thing he tweets all the time, every day, right? That's, oh, people don't understand how much single payer would help during the pandemic because the lies that I told was that when I was a health insurance executive. And this guy, I think he was like a Marvel Comics writer, quote tweets that and says, oh my God, the disgusting piece of shit actually admitted it. And that quote tweet got 75,000 likes by the time enough people had pointed out to him who Wendell Potter is that he deleted it. And the reason I bring this up is not because it's terribly significant, right? Or not that it's a big deal. It's not a big deal, right? It's not great. We shouldn't totally trivialize like smearing somebody's good name through the mud to an audience of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, if 75,000 had liked it, as if it were a nothing. But, it's not traumatic, right? I'm sure Wendell Potter is fine. The reason that it's the reason that I think it's a very telling example is that this guy who tweeted this, it would have taken him literally 2 to 3 seconds to find out who Wendell Potter was. All he would have had to do was click on his name on the tweet, and he would have seen his bio and seen that he was the head of businessman for single payer or whatever, right? And he didn't do that, right? Why not? Well, exactly, right? I mean, Peter Coffin has a nice phrase in his video on this where he says it's like the Panopticon is an app, which is, which I think there's a lot of truth to, right? Or like the same thing with Justine Sacco having an awkwardly phrased tweet that she saw as an anti-racist joke, right? And even though she was, a no-name person, right? She had a very good job, right, as a PR person, but she only had 170 Twitter followers, and because people who were seeing it out of context thought it was racist, and they were like denouncing it as racist. Oh my God, this person who works in public relations has a racist tweet. There were literally like millions of people talking about this. She was the number one trending topic on Twitter. She got fired from her job. The New York Post hired people to follow her to the gym. BuzzFeed was combing through her old tweets, looking for something else that could take off context. And again, you think about examples like Wendell Potter, Justine Sacco, and it seems to me that this is a case that these are cases that really show what we're talking about, right? We talk about cancel culture, call out culture, denunciate, whatever you want to call it, right? Which is this real hair trigger denunciation that I think is because the way social media platforms are set up really reward our worst impulses, just towards lightning judgments and pile-ons and all of that stuff, because these are corporate-owned for-profit entities. Right? They're not, like Mark Zuckerberg is not out for charity. Facebook and Twitter and all of this they're designed, right? Watch The Social Dilemma. They're designed to be as addictive as at all possible so their owners can make more money. And you put those bad incentives built into the structure of the technology itself, together with the fact that we live in a neoliberal hellscape where people are incredibly alienated and atomized. I'm tempted to say late capitalism, but of course that might be too optimistic. We don't know how much longer capitalism will last. Yeah, well, I do cook things other than burgers, but when it's my turn to cook, I do often default lazily into that. But yeah, right. Like, and then also combined with the fact that the labor movement is a very deep state of retreat, and most American workers work in at-will employment workplaces, right? So in other words, the boss can fire you without having to provide a good reason or give you any sort of due process. Really makes the problem that much worse, right? Because you have this atmosphere where doxing somebody, right, can mean that they lose their ability to provide a livelihood to their families, they lose their health insurance, and again, it's just a total neoliberal nightmare. And so I think what we're pointing to when we use that phrase cancel culture, it's not something that comes out of the left, right? It's not something that's, like the sort of story that you get from Jordan Peterson or Quillette or any of those people, that it's something that just arises from left-wing egalitarian impulses. That's not what's going on there. It's a general disease of late capitalism or neoliberalism or whatever you want to call it that infects the entire ideological spectrum. And in fact, I think that the best, I think the reason the left should start denying that the phenomenon happens is so we can take ownership of the issue away from the right, because in fact we have solutions. All they can do is complain about it, whereas we can say that they have that there are things that we can actually do to solve the problem, or at least really diminish the problem if we can't completely solve it. Like, for example, nationalizing giant social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, so we can make instead of trying to find new ways to make it more addictive so the companies that own them can make more money, we can make collective democratic decisions about how we want them to work, like ending at-will employment, so people wouldn't be worried that some tweet was going to be taken out of context, they'd lose their livelihood. So again, I don't know if those things would completely solve it, but they're certainly better than anything the right or the I'm a classical liberal types can offer. And that's not to say that's not a problem on the left. Of course it's a problem on the left. In fact, I think the intersection of cancel culture with the specific pathologies of the left often creates a really toxic brew that's very alienating to a lot of the people that we're trying to persuade. But I don't think it's something that emerges from the left. I think it's something that emerges from the fact that from neoliberal social atomization, at-will employment, and the bad incentives built into the technology itself. Somebody asks about what I think about philosophy professor Jun. I'm not familiar with that case. Link me an article or something and I'll take a look. Anyway, so I never really answered the original question, right? About what about like people who really deserve to be canceled? And look, if all you mean by canceling there is just sort of really harsh online denunciation, yeah, there are people who deserve that, right? I feel no sympathy whatsoever for, well, certainly somebody who's an actual fascist or even like some, contemptible neocon, never Trump Republican who works for the New York Times or something. But I think what's really objectionable about this is the hair trigger that all of the economic and cultural and technological trends I've been talking about mean that people are just way too quick to go from zero to harsh denunciation and pile on. And I think that's the real problem. And again, the point is not to cancel the cancelers. The point is not to say that anybody's a bad person because they've fallen into this. I'm sure I've fallen into this. I'm sure there are times when I've thoughtlessly participated in some online pile on. Just because you have a critique of it doesn't mean that you're immune from the bad incentives that cause the problem. So the point isn't to morally judge people who participate. The point is to think about where the phenomenon comes from, why it's a problem, and what, if anything, we can collectively do about it. The whole point of this critique, or a big part of the point of this critique, is that I want the left to be less about morally evaluating the character of individuals and more about collective action to try to create a better world, just to be all cheesy about it. All right. There's a question earlier. If you have anything else, I've been going for a while, and I do want to wrap up so I can finally make dinner. But if you have anything else you want me to address, please do. Do a super chat and ask. Yeah, somebody in the chat was wondering about reviews of my new book. As far as I know, there's only one so far, which was from Matt McManus in Marion West, I want to say. I'll find it and stick the link in the notes for the stream, as well as where you can pre-order the book from Red Emma's, which I'm sure some of you are sick of hearing me talk about, but I just like I hate how much, I'll use Jeff Bezos's sweatshop book ordering business when I have to, but I much prefer to direct people to a worker co-op like Red Emma's. I think we talked about this on, I think, the last live stream or the one before it. You can go back and look at those. Lots of problems with markets per se. The question is just, what problems can you solve at any given stage of socialism without creating a bunch of new ones? And that's the challenge, right? I think, really, really long term, I think maybe we could have something like, what Aaron Bastani talks about, right? Fully automated luxury communism. So audiobooks, there actually are plans in the works to do an audiobook for Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. I know that's a very long time coming, but I actually just talked a day or two ago to the person who I think is going to be reading the audiobook. So it's coming. Gears are grinding very slowly, but it's coming. I know it's frustrating for some of you who prefer to take in books that way. Speaking of, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. Yeah. So again, give me a super chat if you have any other questions that you want to ask. You want me to answer before we end today. I was going to say, yeah. All right. I was going to say, sorry. Somebody earlier had asked me about what I was reading right now. So I'll at least answer. I'll at least answer that question. And again, if anybody wants to throw in a super chat or something, I'll answer that before I go. Also, if you came on late and you missed this at the beginning, my apologies about the delay of the premiere. Something seems to have gone wrong on YouTube's end when my video editor uploaded it. It's very frustrating, but we're just going to have to reschedule the premiere till tomorrow, same time. But in any case, somebody asked me what I was reading, right? So I'll do that. I have been reading a novel. That's a good one. You can only nationalize one company, Walmart, Amazon, or Google. Which do you pick? That is a really hard choice. God, can I have two? I guess I've spent so much time reading about the horrific work conditions and injuries and high-tech surveillance at Amazon warehouses for a couple of things that I've written about it. that I'm kind of tempted to say Amazon, but Walmart is like nipping at its heels, right? Those, I think actually the article that I'm writing for Jacobin right now, I just talked to Bhaskar the other day about what my next few articles should be, and I think the article that I'm going to start writing for them this week is about the case for nationalizing Walmart. But if I had to pick, I might go Amazon. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. Somebody asked me about books I'm reading, so I have been reading a novel by William Gibson and Bruce Sterling called The Difference Engine, which is an alternate history thing, basically, where Ada Lovelace was much more successful than she was in our world in developing computer technology like a century earlier than it was. And it's a really fun book. I listened to a little bit of on Audible on the drive from Georgia to Michigan, and I found a copy here, and I've been reading that. I have let's see what else. See, I haven't started reading it yet, but I actually got in the mail today. I have absolutely no idea who sent this to me, but thank you, whoever it was. It was on my wish list. This book, The Contradictions of Real Socialism, The Conductor and the Conducted by Michael A. Leibowitz, which looks super interesting. I actually just got back from walking Lucy and saw this like 15 minutes before I started this stream. So let's see. What else have I been reading lately? Oh, yeah. I've been listening to the audiobook very, very slowly of Rick Perlstein's new book, Riggenland. I'd read all three of the previous books that he'd written. Before the Storm, which is about the Barry Goldwater campaign, The Invisible Bridge, the fall of Nixon. Oh, sorry, Nixonland. So it's Before the Storm is the Goldwater one. He has this series of books on the history of conservatism. So Before the Storm, and then Nixonland, and then The Invisible Bridge, the fall of Nixon and the rise of Reagan, and now Riggenland. So I'd read all three of our. I think I listened to them all as audiobooks. I listened to all three of the other ones, and I'm very slowly listening to Riggenland now. But it's a giant book. It's gonna be a very long time before I get through all of that. But I've been enjoying it, right? I mean, it's Perlstein. He's not a socialist or anything, as far as I can tell. He's just a lib, but he's a very he's a really interesting and insightful historian, and I think he has a lot of interesting things to say about the rise of the conservative movement, and if you want to kind of learn what you can from looking at that experience, I'd really recommend all of Perlstein's books. All right, guys, it's been about an hour. Like I said, I was about to make dinner when I started this. I was about to make dinner when I saw that something had gone wrong with the YouTube premiere, and so I wanted to come on and do a stream to apologize for that. Let you guys know that it was still going to happen. It's just being delayed till tomorrow while we figure out what happened with YouTube. Anyway, so many apologies about that. Will happen tomorrow. And then, I'll do, I was thinking I'd probably do the usual midweek live stream on Thursday again this week rather than Wednesday, because the vice presidential debate is on Wednesday. So I guess, could do some post-debate breakdown and commentary as part of the midweek live stream if I do it on Thursday instead of Wednesday. But yeah, read Rick Perlstein for sure, and listen to Black Sabbath, and I will see everybody in a few days for the next live stream. And meanwhile, the YouTube premiere of episode 8 is going to be tomorrow instead of today because of the technical hiccup with YouTube. It's a really good episode. There's Paul Prescott talking about his Jacobin article about Trump's war on organized labor, and there's a really good, really in-depth panel on Eugene V. Debs with Harvey J.K., Daniel Bessner, and Sean Goody from Jacobin. So it's really good stuff. And of course, a great Outlaws and Revolutionaries segment with David Griscom, since Griscom was drinking mezcal during that segment. So the episode is titled "Drinking Mezcal" and talking about Eugene V. Debs. So do please check that out tomorrow. It's really good. So watch the YouTube premiere tomorrow. I'll see you again for the next stream in a few days. And I really am going to cut it there. Left is best.